I don't want to
Sure.
have to explain my existence. I don't want to have to explain the basic level why my hair is like this one day and it's like different the next day. Like, I just want some of those things to be easy, because relationships are hard enough and you have to go through so much. I just don't want that to be another thing.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome to 30 Years and Running. I'll be your host, Christian, and each week my friends and I will be looking at life seen through the eyes of 30-somethings. Whether it's things like dating, social media, or mental health, we'll be looking at the past, present, and future of being in your 30s. Your opinion is wrong. I'm sorry to tell you, but...
It's not, though.
On that note, welcome to 30 Years and Running. I've got the misfortune. joke.
I
I've got the pleasure.
2.5 hours
No. I've got
to
it.
be
No,
here.
I'm just taking a piss. I've got the great pleasure of introducing my friend Mary. How you doing?
Hi.
You okay? You well?
I really was. I was having a really good day, and then I got here and I've just been insulted the whole time.
I haven't insulted you. We've had a nice chat. We've had a nice catch up.
Been insulted. I'm so close to crying now, but like I'm holding it back in.
Please don't cry. We for a bit of context, we used to work together for a couple months at TFL.
Good old days.
Yeah, the good old days. And yeah, we used to hang out all the time, apparently.
All the time, every Thursday, we're in Jack's.
Yeah, in Jack's, and
You
Nando's,
laugh, but I
Coco
genuinely have memories of us hanging out, and you have clearly forgotten them all.
I think you've made these memories up, to be honest.
I didn't make them up. We were there, we were hanging out, and you've just forgotten them all.
Okay.
It's all right, it's fine. I'll keep those memories dear.
That's a bit creepy, but you know. You do you. I'm joking. But yeah, welcome to the podcast. It's good to have you on.
Welcome.
And generally, I appreciate you coming from the arse end of nowhere to come here as well, so thank you.
Okay, that's a backhanded compliment.
No, it's just backhand, to be fair.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Anyway.
Why did I come?
Because you wanted to see me. It's been a long time since we've seen each other.
I did not
and
want to see you.
You were like, Christian, when are you going to invite me onto the podcast? And I was like, when you grow up.
Okay, and now I have not grown up and I'm still here. Thank
Yeah,
you.
that's a bit concerning, but, you know, a bit R. Kelly vibes, but, you know, we carry on. We move.
That was a fucking leap.
Yeah, that wasn't cool. Anyway, sorry, we're digressing. We're here today to talk about... So, basically, last week, we did an episode on interracial dating. So, this week, we're going to be talking about dating within your race. Sound good? Sound good? Fun times?
Yeah.
All right, cool.
I'm ready.
All right. So, just for a bit of scene setting, I guess. From your standpoint, are you dating within your race only nowadays, or...
I wouldn't say I'm dating only within my race, right?
Okay, but like predominantly, maybe?
I would say that it's not coincidence, but like the past couple of guys that I've been on dates with have been black men.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'll explain probably in a bit more detail, but like I would generally say that I've dated more black men in the last few years than I have any other race.
Fair enough. And was there anything that I guess sparked that, or was it just like a conscious decision, or what's the reason for it, I guess?
I think it was 2020, right? So like 2020, COVID, Black Lives Matter becoming more prominent within the world. Like Black Lives Matter obviously have been running for many years before. And we've obviously, I've lived as a black woman for many, many years. But I think in 2020, I think so many people started to realise, I've got loads of friends, right? Friends from so many different backgrounds, white friends, Asian friends, so forth. It was like they all just suddenly realised that I was black in that moment. And having to have that conversation with people who've known me for 20 years and being like, they'd be like, are you okay? How are you doing? And I'd be like, yeah, I'm living every day as I have for many, many years. You're just realising it. I just found it quite difficult having some of those conversations with really, really good friends of mine. And it wasn't necessarily a conscious decision. It was more just like, I don't want to have this conversation in a relationship. I don't want to have to explain my existence. I don't want to have to explain the basic level why my hair is like this one day and it's like different the next day. Like, I just want some of those things to be easy, because relationships are hard enough and you have to go through so much. I just don't want that to be another thing.
Got you. Okay. So that makes complete sense to me. So like, I guess from your perspective, it's not even, this is what I'm hearing anyway. It's not even so much like a physical kind of thing. It's just more of like a kind of I guess like a cultural familiarity thing. And I guess within relationships, there's enough to contend with, let alone having to explain to a non-black person, like why your hair's a certain way or why this, that and the other, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also the fact of like, in the nicest way, I always say this before I say something mean, but like,
Let's hear it.
in that, I think discrimination is so personal, and I feel like it's something you can't really explain to someone. So like, as a woman and a woman of color, you have two ticks against you, right? You have two forms of discrimination, two ways people can discriminate against you. So other women not of color will be able to relate in some way, shape or form. So I can sit down with my white girls and be like, you know what it's like to be a woman if someone discriminates you for something you're born with and you can't get with. And I can have that conversation quite openly. I can also have that conversation with most black men. You know what it's like to be black. What I find really difficult when you date white men, or mainly white men, Asian men, different story, but like when you date white men, is that they have they're not born with any discrimination. They're not born with any ticks against them.
Right. So
having to explain, it's really, really difficult because they have no lived experience of it. So I find it really challenging in that room. And don't get me wrong, I've met white men who are so far on their journey, but I find you are the antithesis. You are the absolute opposite to who I am. And that makes it really challenging.
Yeah, sure. And I was going to ask about that as well, because I guess, have you met any, or have you been out with any, I suppose, non-black guys who've actually been quite receptive to your past and kind of what you've gone through as well? Or have you actually just found, like, regardless of how woke they might be, like, it's always going to be a challenge, I guess, because they just obviously haven't experienced the same experiences that you've had?
I think a bit of both. Like I've gone out with the white men I tend to date would be men who were like immersed in black culture, so they've grown up in black culture, so they have a level of appreciation of black culture and black people, and they will be guys who have like actively dated black women, which is another issue because fetishizing and so forth.
We might get onto that, to be fair.
But ultimately, no matter how much you appreciate it, I don't feel like you can understand it. Because you haven't lived it.
Yeah. I think, it's always hard to kind of see someone's point of view if you haven't kind of been in their shoes, I guess. So, I mean, I think that makes complete sense to me. Sorry, excuse me. I think for me, so I guess for disclosures, like I just date whatever race really. I think for me, it's just kind of like how well I get on that person. I think if the cultural familiarity is there, then that's obviously an added bonus. But for me, it kind of just depends on, I guess, the reasons behind why you might date within your race. So I think your reason is completely valid in terms of just having that synergy with someone who just has the same life experience or has just had the same or a similar journey to you. I think where it becomes a bit of a problem, and I'm sure we'll talk about this in a bit more detail actually, is where it can be borderline races, I guess, is like the reasons why you only date within your race. So like, for example, if someone dates within their race because, you know, they only like light skin and light eyes, for example, like I think that's quite sketchy territory for me. Likewise, on the far end of the spectrum, if someone just says, I don't want to date someone outside, say for example, I don't want to date a black guy because like he's got big lips and he's can't find a job, then that's just fucking racist, right? So I think basically what I'm kind of getting to is like, I don't think it makes you racist to date within your race, so long as you have the kind of the right reasons for doing it, and as long as the reasons aren't racist, I think it's absolutely fine. And I think sometimes, you know, people potentially get on their high horse about it just because they're just trying to be part of the woke brigade, basically. But
I do find it difficult, right? So that I agree with everything you've said. I don't disagree. First time ever, you know. But what I find challenging is that everyone has a type, right? And where it starts to get a bit sketchy, where it starts to get a bit grey, is when you start to add racial connotations to said type. It's like Love Island is such a good example, not to make this whole episode about Love Island, but we could.
Please don't. I don't watch Love Island, by the way. For like however many years I didn't watch it. Last year I then became obsessed with it. This year even more obsessed with it. But I view it as in like, has anyone ever walked off your show?
I will be the first.
I've walked off my own show, actually, funny enough, for a brief moment of time. But yeah, anyway.
I will walk off your show.
No, you won't.
You were
Come
so
on.
horrible.
I'm lovely.
You're not.
You really you like me, really.
I don't like you.
You've got a really small soft spot for me.
I don't. You're like really, really, really small.
Right,
no,
cool.
not at all.
Right.
But I look at it as a social experiment, right? Is that people go on and they say they're type, but really what they're saying as an undertone is white or another colour. So someone will go on and be like, oh, I really like brunettes, but they don't mean someone of colour. They'll be like, I'm technically a brunette, I'm someone who has dark hair, but they'll be like, oh, I like someone who's brunette, has a big bum and all of this lot and all the characteristics, but then they wouldn't go for somebody who of colour.
Yeah,
so
sure.
there's an essence where you're sort of like, you can have a type, but if your type doesn't merge into various different races, why not just say it? Because I'd prefer it to someone to be like, I only date white girls who have very similar characteristics to black women, but I'd love them to be white.
I think part of it as well is just like, I'm assuming this is probably coming from a white guy, right? Like he's probably just like the white race is often seen as like,
well.
Oh really?
Yeah.
On Love Island?
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Oh, that's interesting. But I guess people always, regardless of especially for white people, but I guess in this instance for black people as well, like I guess the white race is always like the default race.
Yeah.
So that's why people don't feel like they need to add in like, oh, I only like black brunettes or something like that. But
yeah, absolutely.
That's quite interesting. I didn't actually clock on that it would come from a black guy as well, but hey ho. Everybody's got their preference, right? I think at the end of the day. So
but then to your point, right, so like it's the difference between like a preference, because if you say like, if there's ever an essence of dating within your race can then be deemed as racist, I would find bizarre. Like I would never think that dating within your race could be deemed as racist, because I feel like it's always going to come down to preference. It's always going to come down to what your innate like attraction is, and that I don't think society changes that to some degree, but I feel we don't have much control over that. It's subconscious rather than conscious.
Yeah.
So like I don't think you could ever accuse someone of being racist if they date within their race.
No,
regardless
definitely
of
not.
their reasons to do so.
No, I don't think so, to be fair. Yeah, I don't think so. I think a lot of it just boils down to like two things for me in terms of like who you go out with. It's probably not as like cut and dry as this, but like one is just like physical attraction, right?
Yeah.
And then the other bit is what we kind of talked about earlier, is just cultural kind of familiarity. And I just think, I think if you've got a type, so for me, example, like I don't have a type. Like my type is whoever I get on best with. And like I say, the cultural familiarity thing is just a bonus on top. But
see, I don't believe that when people say that.
Don't you? Why not?
Because I think everybody still does have a type, whether they want to or not. Like you can get on well with someone, but I think yes, you can get on well with someone and be attracted to them. But then I think people are attracted to what they're attracted to. Mm-hmm. I just think like it feels like it's such a taboo now to be like my type is.
I don't know, because like I think if you looked at like my dating history, like it's very varied, to be honest. Like there's I don't think, well, you could tell me if I'm wrong, to be fair, but I don't think there's like a recurring theme physically anyway between them. I think there's probably more of a recurring theme like personality wise, and I think at this age, especially in like 30s, like I definitely veer more towards like, okay, who can I just chill with basically, and it feel like I'm just chilling with a best friend who I just fancy, rather than just someone who is my quote unquote type. So
then that I think is quite a unique perspective. Like I don't think that speaks to the majority of. I don't necessarily think that speaks to the majority of people.
Probably doesn't, to be fair.
And I know I'm using my one example as Love Island, because it is a good social experiment.
Yeah.
For someone who does this show and runs and talks about all of this stuff, you should watch it for the social.
I can't. It's so painful.
But purely just to observe and to see how people navigate and how they treat dating and.
Yeah, I've seen it. I just don't really like it, like any aspect of it at all. Like I know that sounds really, really boring, but I'm just like.
It doesn't sound boring, because I was 100% where you were. Like for years and years and years, I hated it. Whenever anyone spoke about it, I would absolutely hate it. But I do think for the conversations that you're having on this show, and for the conversations that you're clearly interested in, it is such a fruitful ground to answer some of those questions in real life. Because it's basically all of these conversations manifested on TV.
Yeah, I just haven't got the patience to watch it, to be honest. I don't get me wrong, I've seen it before, but I've tuned onto it, and it's just like immediately, it's just like I have to switch off because it's really painful to watch. Like all the girls are the same, all the guys are the same. They've all got like skinny jeans, like skinny jeans. You can see their ankles. They all act like in a certain way, and it's just like it's not something that I just like to watch. I just don't find it like interesting.
That has to be one of the best reasons not to watch Love Island, because you can see their ankles.
It's so dumb. Like I don't want to see your dry ankles, man. Like
what happens if they're moisturised ankles?
I still don't want to see your ankles. Do you know what I mean? And they all look the same as well, so that's a real problem. No, and they're all act the same. They're all like I don't know. It's not for me. I do think
more so. I mean, this is TV in general. Like it's obviously curated, and there's lots of producers behind the scenes who are making hella money, like being able to like feed in storylines and all that shit. But in terms of like how black women I think have been portrayed, there's so many storylines across the board, but like the undertone and the narrative, I think in the circles that I move in and the echo chamber that I exist in, like how black women are portrayed on that show and how black women are over sexualized and yet not treated as wifey material is literally manifested on TV. So I don't
even think that's just on TV. Like black women are the most disrespected people on earth.
Absolutely,
like, bar none. And I just think, you know, having it on a show like Love Line is just bringing it to full. It's like nothing new, right?
100%.
And I'm sure. Sorry, I was just gonna say quickly, and you might have even experienced this on dating apps, for example. But I could imagine, and this is just me, just kind of thinking out loud. I can imagine that there's a lot of that kind of hypersexualization of black women on there. I could imagine that you're probably getting messages or DMs, wherever that might be, saying along the lines of, oh, I've never been with a black woman, or I love your chocolate skin, or I love how exotic you are, and stuff like that, like all that kind of nonsense. So
that's exactly it. So the fetish point I made earlier, right? So that is exactly it. Like you will find that more common, and I'm not someone to generalize. I hope you know me well enough now from all the times we hung out. But like I'm not someone to generalize people, but more often than not on those dating apps, more often than not, white men that you meet, Asian men that you meet are dating you for fetish, and I'm not about being someone's fetish.
And I suppose, see, that's another good reason why you would probably just date within your race, right? Is because you don't want to have that fetishization, like every single time you meet up with that person, or just kind of have that in the back of your mind, like, oh, this person's only with me because he thinks I'm exotic, or just because he wants to kind of tick a box.
But don't get me wrong, I've dated many black men who have been in a similar vein and been like, oh, as a black girl you're expected to do more things, you're dirtier, you're going to be like, you know, freak in the sheets, like lady in the streets mentality.
I've not heard
100%. And I can't remember who came up with that lyric, but I want to murder him. Like it's literally
Ludacris, I think. Luda.
Gotta love Ludacris. But
Ludacris is sick, to be fair. I don't know if he created it, but I remember him saying it. But anyway.
Bar that line, legend. But like that mentality, absolutely I've dated black men who have had that. And be like, oh, my white girls wouldn't do this with me, or my white girls wouldn't be this. Oh, you're
I thought it was the other way around.
Crazy.
Maybe I didn't get the memo, but I thought it was the other way around.
Whoa. Oh, you get freakiness from your white girls.
Yeah, I thought that was the.
It depends on I think it depends on the guy that you're dating. Like I feel like so many men are trash. Like
I was trying to come up with like a rebuttal to that, but I don't have anything, so please continue.
So many men are trash. Like as a baseline.
No, there's good ones out there.
I've not said all men.
I know.
So many men are trash, right? Of various different races. But for me, like the trash that I've just, as I get older, like that I'm just not willing to put up with is the over fetishizing. Can't say that word, too many glasses of wine, but like it's the fact of like being able to literally, I could be any black girl, and like it doesn't matter who I am, what I do, like my thought process, like how smart or how hilarious I am, because you know I'm hilarious, right?
I mean, debatable, but
you think I'm really funny, but like
carry on.
It doesn't matter. None of those things actually matter, because you're only going after me because I'm a black girl. And that is so like demoralizing. It's so dehumanizing.
Yeah, sure.
And no one wants to be in seeing someone like that, let alone try to build a relationship off the back of that.
Yeah, of course. And like I say, I think that gives you even more just cause as to why you personally are only, you know, dating within your own race for the time being anyway. So, and like I say, it just goes back to that point I was making, that I think it's fine as long as there's good rationale behind why you're doing it. And I think that is a good rationale for why you wouldn't potentially date outside your race. But,
I mean, like, I never say no to anything. Like, if I wouldn't say I'm never, ever, ever in my life going to date a white man, an Asian man, or anyone else from outside my race. I just think more often than not, I'll find more success with people who have lived some experience that I have lived.
No, I think that makes sense. So I guess tell me this: when you see black guys with someone who isn't black, look at you giggling away because you knew this question was coming, right? Yeah. So when you see a black guy who's not with a black woman, like, how does that make you feel? Like, honest, like, cards on the table, like, how does that genuinely make you feel? Or are you not too fussed about it?
I'm genuinely never been too fussed. I'm like literally like each to their own. It's more that like genuinely each. I grew up with brothers, right, and all of my brothers have dated like a multitude of different women from different races, different backgrounds and so forth, and I've never had an issue because I think they'll take your mentality. Like, if I can vibe with someone, if I can chill with someone, I don't really care what race they are. I do think, and controversially, see how I feel whether you'll cut this bit out, is that as black men you do, yes, we have 2 points knocked off, like women, being a woman, being a person of colour. You only have one, so there's a certain level of privilege that you can date outside your race. Don't get me wrong, if I was with my black guys now, they'll say, oh, we're fetishized in the same way and blah blah blah, we have the same struggles, but ultimately you don't, because you're dating a white woman who will understand what it's like to be discriminated against as a woman. So they have some level, there's something, a baseline that you guys can relate to, and a baseline that you guys can like come to, that she kind of will get you more than a white man will ever get me.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that completely, to be fair. I think it's kind of hard. It's not comparing apples with apples when it comes to discrimination, right? So like,
no,
there's obviously like parallels, but I think, you know, a white woman can understand a black man getting pulled over by police, for example, or
can't understand. Okay.
I don't think so. Or just like the way we're kind of perceived in life as always being a threat, basically. I don't think that's something that's comparable, but I do take the point in terms of like, as a woman, like, you obviously go through some struggles, or you have some discrimination against you, which is comparable, I suppose, to black men. But I don't think, I don't know, my sense is like the level in terms of like the level of like, I suppose, kind of discrimination is a lot different, I'd say.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And yeah, I think you're right. I wouldn't be able to understand what it's like to be pulled over by...
Yeah, but I also understand, I take your point in terms of like the comparison between like a white woman, black man versus white man versus black woman is probably more I think it's probably kind of more positive in terms of like understanding when it comes to the black man and the white woman compared to the other one. But
you're absolutely right, and I think it's a very, very fair challenge, right? Is that not all discrimination is level and equal. Absolutely agree with that, and that was probably a misstep on my point. It's more that a level of discrimination, to have experienced a level of discrimination, to have experienced someone judge you for something that you were born with, right? Yeah. So as a woman, have someone, like a guy, speak over you in a meeting, have someone like push you aside and be like, you're not good enough, blah, blah, blah. And as a person of colour, the various different multitude of discrimination that we go through. As a white woman, to some level and some degree, and it'll be the woker side of the white women who'll be able to relate to that.
Yeah, no,
and I feel like if you were in a relationship with a white woman, you could have a conversation about discrimination and impose it to her and say, it's like if you're a woman and a man did that to you, and she get it. If I'm in a relationship with a white man, there's nothing I can say in that respect to me. I
get it. I get it in respect of like white man, probably the least discriminated versus black woman, the most discriminated versus black man. Kind of, he's pretty far up the spectrum in terms of most discriminated versus white woman who's not, like, she's been discriminated but like not the least discriminated. Yeah, I get that. But yeah, I think it's almost like misery loves company, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I genuinely don't walk around the streets being a super bitter, salty woman. Although you called me salty earlier, which really, really hit home. But like,
you are Himalayan pink salty.
I'll take that. I'll take that.
That makes it sound quite good.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, it sounds fancy. I like it.
Yeah.
But I don't walk around the streets being like, oh my god, look at all these black men with white women. How rude! You'd let your race down. I'm not that
Do you know
kind
what?
of girl.
You'd be surprised though, because I think some black women feel that type of way. And again, I'm not generalizing here, but I remember so one example, right, is quite a random one. But when I was on Hinge, someone had messaged me. And you know, before, are you on Hinge?
Not right now.
but you know the mechanic, right?
Yeah.
But basically, like, you can kind of message someone before you match with someone, right? And someone messaged me. Yeah, you can message them. Like, you can kind of like look at their photo or one of their prompts.
Oh, and then you send a thing on. On when you like them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
So like, this is before we've even matched, right? But I think she commented on my photo and she said, "Do you still like Caucasian women?" Like, kind of laughing emoji. Immediately, so I was initially going to ignore that, to be fair, but I was like, actually, let me see what this girl's about. So like, I accepted the match, and then I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And then she started talking about how she actually, funny enough, watched the podcast, and because the only women that I'd had on so far were all white women, she just kind of assumed.
Is that why you brought me here?
Yeah, it just needed to tick the diversity box, to be fair. I'm joking.
So welcome.
No, but she was just like. She just assumed, based on that, I don't know where that assumption came from, but she just assumed that I only like white women, even though, like, you know.
Was she black?
Yeah, she was black.
Yeah.
So anyway, I had to like talk her down and stuff like that. But it just, the reason why I kind of mentioned that as well is I just feel like some black women, and it's not even just black women, to be fair, it's just like some women of any race feel a type of way when they see their race of men dating an outside of their race.
Yeah.
But I just thought that was, I don't know. It kind of took me aback a little bit, to be
fair.
But
it's interesting, it's perspective, right? Because I've been on dates with white guys, or even my white guy friends, and walked around with them, and I had some of the most saltiest reactions from black men, or like a rolling of eyes.
Yeah, it works
so
both ways,
it's
right?
Exactly the same way. I don't know what that instinct is, but again, like, we're not a monolith, like, we are not people who work as one soul movement. So, like, I don't believe that, like, I feel no way about it. I'm like, each to their own. Like, everybody needs to do it. But to your point, it's for the right reasons. Because flipping on its head, there are, and I don't think it's necessarily our generation, generations before us, our parents' generation, there were black men who came over here and would have dated solely white women because they wanted to get a foot into that society. They wanted to be able to be affiliated and move through the ranks. It was... very bad example. I'm literally going to forget his name because too many glasses of wine.
I feel like I know who you're talking about as well.
Oh, it's so annoying.
I'm thinking about OJ Simpson.
I'm thinking about OJ Simpson.
There you go. Yeah.
So OJ.
Before you even start, I just want to say, fuck OJ. I just want to get that out of the way. But anyway, sorry, carry on.
That was great. I was literally like, I could see him, I could see the glove, and I was like, what is wrong with me?
Fuck OJ. Yeah, no.
Blank.
He's not ours.
So, as in, you can try to not claim him, but
he's not.
You know, he is.
Yeah.
So OJ's whole thing was that, like, when his whole pitch was, and don't get me wrong, like, there was so much movement, even when it came down to the case, there was people who backed him from both races, right? OJ's whole thing was like, in order for me to move through the ranks, I cannot be associated with black women. I want to be associated with white men because that's who I am now. I've earned a certain amount of money. I've become a certain type of people. I'm moving in these spaces. I can't bring my black girlfriend from these days. I have to find myself not only a white woman, but someone who was like the epitome of
white, like young white black young blonde, white blonde, like eyes, really like, kind of
and he did that whole thing, and that was a whole generational move. But what he didn't realize is that he created a movement, he created people who then followed in his footsteps, and you had loads of NBA
like basketball players.
Yeah, it's like what I don't even know what support what
no, you're good. National Basketball Association, you're good.
All of them who followed him, all of these insanely, they got to a certain level, they ditched their college girlfriends who were black women, and then they followed in OJ's footsteps, and it became and still to this day you still have the majority of black men who are in very, very high positions in the US who are married to and have actively chosen to marry white women, not because of, and I don't know them all individually, but it doesn't seemingly appear to be because of an attraction, and because they've all through their lives and all through their college careers, they're dating black women and they make it really big, and then they've suddenly chosen to date white women.
So on that point, I guess it's kind of hard to say because we don't know that person, right? But I think to what degree, again, this is probably more of a rhetorical question, but to what degree do you think that is a case of, okay, because they've got more wealth, that maybe opens up more opportunities to kind of mingle with white people, and you know, if you're mingling with more white people, like you're potentially going to become more interested in. So I guess my question is like, how comes that interest couldn't be legit rather than it being like a kind of a, you know, a kind of a play to climb the social ladder, as it were?
I'm not saying it's not legit. I'm just saying that it started with
I think
OJ
is an exception. I think NBA players, I can't speak for them, but I just, so side note, I'm like really fascinated with like OJ Simpson and like his case. So I've watched like literally like every single documentary of it. Have you? But I think
read the book?
I haven't read the book. What If I Did It?
Yeah.
I haven't read that, but I've seen the interview of it. But basically, I know from like his interviews and stuff like that, unlike probably some or maybe all of like the NBA players, that he legit like did that to like, because he wanted to kind of distance himself from the black community. So I guess what I was going to say about OJ is like he said a few times as well, like I don't know if you've seen Made in America, like that documentary. It's like a 4-part documentary, but like one of his quotes from there is really good actually. But one of his quotes from there, and there's something that Jay-Z says on Story with OJ as well. It's like he's like, I'm not black, I'm OJ.
Yeah.
So he like constantly tries to like distance himself from the black community and trying to treat him as like kind of race agnostic.
But I think he's probably the most high profile version of it. But
yeah,
there
100%.
Many.
Yeah.
And also America's very different because like I think culturally and racism and so forth is very, very different to how we experience it growing up.
Yeah.
There. So I feel like it's very much like there's more of a divide and more of a you're either one or the other and you have to choose. And if you're part of the white, like the higher echelons of society, then you no longer can carry your black label, so you have to shed all your blackness at the door and then move into this vein. At least that's what it was for OJ, and that's how he saw it. So
the funny thing about OJ real quick though is because once he kind of had the murder charge, like he became black again in the eyes of America.
Because they disowned him. The white community disowned him.
And I think that's a really good. It's a really good example of just how, regardless of how much money you have and you know what car you drive and all that kind of superficial stuff, at the end of the day, sorry, in the words of Kanye West, you're still a nigger in a coupe.
Yeah.
And I think he found that out the hard way, and he tried to go back to the black community afterwards as well. But I think by that time it was probably too late for him. But sorry, I just interrupted you while you were talking. But...
No, it's fine. Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And the sad thing is that there was still so many of the black community who was still standing by him up until the verdict.
Well, so part of me thinks, right?
Past the verdict.
Yeah, part of me thinks that, you know, it wasn't so much about OJ why people were standing next to him. It was more the fact there's a bigger picture, right? It was more the fact that actually the LAPD in this instance have been exposed for stuff that they've been doing to regular black people all the time. But it just so happens...
he wasn't standing for that. Like, that's not what he was about.
No, it wasn't. But it's just more like... it wasn't even about OJ is my point. It was just about the fact that we got one. And finally people were kind of like seeing the police for what they really are. Even though, actually, I think OJ did it. In fact, I'm pretty sure OJ did it. But it's more...
100% he did it.
Yeah, 100% he did it. But it's more... It wasn't even about OJ, the person. It was just more the fact that a black man actually kind of beat the system when the system had beaten black people for so long, if that makes sense. But it wasn't even about the fact that people liked OJ. I know at that time he was quite a popular figure.
I don't. Anyway. I think everyone really, really hated him at that. Well, at least from the black community perspective, they all hated him.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. I think it was about supporting your own because someone had taken down our own people. And I think that it's divided America at the time. I genuinely don't know how we got onto OJ.
You were talking about...
It was what he represented.
Yeah. But I think it's a good analogy, to be fair. But yeah, we can't talk about OJ for too much longer because I will go off on a tangent and I'll start talking about all these different documentaries. But anyway, I guess the final thing that we're going to finish on is probably... What do you think, like, again, this is like an open-ended question, but like, what do you think, like, the pros and cons are, I guess, for dating within your race? Like from your experience, like what the pro? I know we've kind of touched on some of them already, but like what's like the kind of the main pro, I suppose, of dating within your race, and what's like the main con of dating within your race?
That's such a hard question. That's a harder question than I think you realise. Like, as in, because I like to treat everyone as individuals, and not necessarily talk about our race as an entirety.
Sure.
But I would genuinely, because also like I've dated black men who are not about the people and who just have no concept whatsoever and don't want. And I'm not saying like on all of my dates, because I'm not a terrible person to date, but like I'm not saying on all of my dates like I'm like, tell me about your experience and talk about the strife. But like but I want to be with someone who can be about the culture to some degree and talk about shared experiences and solutions and so forth. But I've definitely been with guys and dated with guys who have been like, I don't believe that racism exists. I don't believe that we have a problem in this country. Yeah.
I believe racism exists. Okay.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Okay,
but I would say, generally speaking,
yeah,
the pros will be someone who has shared some level of lived experience.
Sure.
Someone who is able to appreciate your discrimination. Someone you can come home with and be like, this happened to me, and them not.
And you don't have to explain it to the nth degree.
And them not question it and be like, oh, but did you look at it differently, or did you see it differently? I feel like that would definitely be the pros. And generally, I think like my type sits more within black men than it does within generally speaking within white men. So
do you just mean like physically on that point, or do you
probably
just
with physically? I would say it sits more with black men than it does with white men. Cons: most men are trash.
Listen, you're not wrong.
I feel like that's. I know
not
I'm not wrong. You know I'm not wrong.
However, we're not all trash. I promise.
Most men are trash, and I think that
there are some good ones here and there. I promise.
I don't believe. Yeah, that's true. I'm joking.
You need to get out of Leytonstone. That's the real problem.
Why?
Because Croydon's...
I love East London equally, not just Leytonstone.
Alright, okay. You need to get out of East London then.
I'm alright, thanks. I'm alright.
Yeah, okay.
But generally speaking, I don't think there's necessarily cons to dating within your race. I think that like, or if you choose to solely, or you choose to whatever, like, I think it's more about men in general. So I don't think there's necessarily cons.
No, I think that's fair enough. I mean, yeah, I tend to agree with that. I think the pro is that you have someone who you obviously don't have to explain different experiences through. And yeah, just someone that you've just got a shared, again, I hate saying this word again, but like, I think it is important, but like that shared kind of cultural familiarity with someone. And then con, I think if I had to say a con out of everything, actually, I guess it's just that you don't get to experience on a romantic level anyway, like a different culture. Again, I don't even think that's a con per se, but it's just something which I guess you're probably, you don't have the, what's the word? Yeah, you just don't have as much exposure to, as if unless you're dating someone from another race, I guess. But again, debatable whether that's a con or just like just a bit of like, just something that you don't get to experience maybe, but I don't know.
It's an interesting point. Like, I think maybe I've had more negative experiences like being exposed to other cultures than I have. So I've never would have seen that as a con, because I'm like, and also like I have so many friends and people around me who are from so many different cultures who have exposed me to their culture. I don't necessarily feel like I'm missing that from a romantic sense.
Fair enough. Yeah.
And also like, as you know, there's so many cultures within black culture.
Yeah,
like
course.
African versus Caribbean, and the nuances between Africa and the nuances between Caribbean in itself. Like, I experienced so much like with Bayesian friends versus African friends, and even African friends, like there's so many layers to it. Like I don't think you're necessarily cutting yourself off if you just date black people, because there's layers to blackness.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Thanks for watching 30 Years and Running. Please subscribe, comment and share. See you next week. Peace.